Before I started collecting mini discs, I wanted to get into collecting cassettes. However, the limited usefulness and feature set of cassettes compared to mini discs ultimately swayed me away from the format. After I started using Discogs to purchase records and CDs, I noticed a lot of unofficial cassettes that would come out of Eastern Europe, particularly Poland, and therefore I have gotten into collecting these releases. In today's video, I would like to delve into looking at just some of the bootleg, unofficial album releases from Eastern Europe, and as well as that, I would like to talk about the history of music piracy in Poland and the late death of the cassette in Poland, since for us, the cassette stuck around quite a lot longer than it did in America and the UK. I will also talk about the equipment that I've purchased and my own bootlegs, so without further ado, let's get into it. Firstly, I am going to go through the history of music formats in Poland. One of the earliest ways for people of Poland to listen to pre-recorded music were the music postcards. These plastic cards began popping up in the early 1960s and were popular up until the 70s, due to the fact that purchasing vinyl was near impossible due to the lack of resources. These so-called postcards would be played on the iconic portable turntable called the Bambino, known for its incredibly high tracking force. This medium was collectible and it was cheap and easily available to purchase. The music postcards were easy to create too, as all you needed to do was cover a postcard with foil and have a machine record music onto the foil. In the 1970s, the next big thing came, which were reel-to-reel tape recorders. They were not cheap, and neither was the tape, but the ability to rewrite music made the high price a little more worth it. This format was mostly suited for copying music from the radio and/or copying music from the West. There were even people who'd obtain vinyl records in any way they could, then rent you the record on reel-to-reel for a fee. Portable cassette recorders did appear in Poland in the early 1970s, and in the mid-1970s, stationary cassette recorders appeared. Like with reel-to-reel, the format was of interest due to being able to record onto it, copying music from friends and family, and recording music from the radio. In the early 1980s, people would even bring their cassette recorders with them to festivals. That way, their citizens had access to copies of music from anti-regime artists. Poland's phonographic industry was still in its infancy, and the martial law of 1981 certainly did not help. There were only 2 record labels, and the cassettes were as expensive as vinyl. After the fall of communism, Poland gained the access to the free market, with people being able to sell whatever they want. Furthermore, with the switch from communism to capitalism, the country as well as its people strive for normality. As defined by Magda Szczesniak, normality is a rejection of the remains of the communist system by rejoining Western Europe and cutting off from the East. And what's a better way to cut ties with the communist past than being able to freely purchase and listen to Western music? The pirate cassette era lasted from 1990 to 1994, where many of Poland's pirate labels would sell Western music without license for a very cheap sum. Suddenly, people had a massive library of songs from the past and the present that they couldn't easily obtain before. A copyright law was introduced in 1994 after pressure from Washington, fear of sanctions, and the fact that these pirate tapes travelled around Eastern Europe. During that time, Poland was a leading worldwide producer of counterfeit tapes. After 1994, cassettes came with a Zyx holographic sticker to prove their authenticity. Official cassettes cost much more than their fake counterparts, and many saw the medium as pointless compared to the CD, which did not cost that much more. Cassettes still lasted as a medium for sharing music with others until CD burners became mass market. And with how expensive CDs were, like the cassette, it was common to download CDs on LimeWire, eMule, and other peer-to-peer platforms. But at this point, I know most of you guys, no matter the age or the country you reside in, know well about the modern music piracy, whether that's LimeWire, Kazaa, Pirate Bay, or just YouTube to MP3, so I'm going to stop the history segment here. Before I talk about the cassettes, let me show you the equipment that I'll be using to play these cassettes back on. Initially, I had bought myself a Sony Walkman. It was your standard affair, having auto-reverse, Dolby noise reduction, and an EQ with mega bass, but it didn't sound great. Turning on the EQ meant the bass being too violent at even the lowest setting, and eventually I realised that the auto-reverse system was not working correctly, sounding very dull on side A. The seller wasn't able to fix it, so I went for a stationary cassette deck instead. This is the Technics SA-X22WRL. It's a cassette deck, a receiver, and an amplifier. Basically, it's a Cassiva, like the one Techmon bought on his channel a few years ago. It only cost me £40 excluding shipping, which was the same price as the Walkman, so this was a stellar value. And not only that, it is absolutely beautiful looking. It looks straight out of the 80s with its rectangular everything, and it feels very solidly built. And the fact that it's still working almost as new shows the quality of Technics. Let me go through all the cool features it has. First of all, there is a spectrum analyzer, and it looks so freaking cool. If you love flashing lights on your hi-fi equipment, this will be right up your alley. There is no dB meter though for recording. There's a graphics equalizer which is awesome to have because it lets you precisely tweak the sound. With the Crave soundbar, I can crack up the bass and have it be obnoxiously bassy, but the EQ also helps with making my headphones sound brighter and restoring higher frequency on tapes. The next cool feature is Music Select. With this feature, all you have to do is press fast forward and it will search for the next track on the cassette. Provided there is a long enough pause between each track, the system works really well. Some folks did not know that such a feature existed, and yeah, it did, and it made life much easier by essentially backporting a feature from the compact disc. Also, all the buttons are soft touch instead of the piano keys. I've never owned a deck with soft touch keys, so this is awesome. It makes the device feel far more premium. There is an auto reverse system, one that moves, unlike on the Walkman. Because there are 2 tape decks, we can do series play, which plays the second tape after the first one. We also have a timer, which, when applied power, either starts automatic playback of the tape or automatic recording, which is quite cool. We also have something called AV Surround. You are able to connect 4 speakers up to the receiver, and with this surround feature, the receiver applies reverberation to create a fake surround sound. It might work better with 4 speakers, but with 2 it's so-so. The sound is wider, but it also gets distorted. I can imagine this working far better for movies than music. In terms of the radio, we have FM, medium wave aka AM, and long wave. Because this was a device created when people actually listen to the radio, the reception is great. I don't have an antenna connected and was able to pick up BBC, and after I grounded my record player to the receiver, I can pick up almost every radio station, albeit in mono. But yeah, because this is from the 80s, there is a connection specifically for record players as this receiver has a built-in preamp. There's also a regular aux RCA jack, which we're expected to use with a CD player, but of course you can use anything with it nowadays. Originally, I wanted to go through my entire cassette collection, but during editing I realized this is actually pretty boring, so instead I'm going to talk about the earliest pirate tapes I own, quickly move on to the post-1994 pirate tapes, and then touch on the tapes I made. The 2 oldest tapes I have here are from Ken Laszlo and Mike Marine. Mind you, I'm not sure how old these actually are. The albums themselves have been released in the 80s, but these cassettes have to be really early based on the design. And let's talk about this design, because it's truly fascinating. Both cassettes feature the cover art predominantly. However, since both CDs and vinyl covers are square and cassette covers are rectangular, these cassettes fill the space by once again writing out the artist and album name. On the Mike Marine one, we can see that this cassette was released by Lazy Music, while the Ken Laszlo one was by Vidax. What is interesting about both releases is that the covers are taken from the original CDs. Both cassettes feature the CD Galaxis logo, and the Mike Marine one also features the ZYX logo. Obviously, neither companies had anything to do with these releases, and I love the fact that between the Galaxis logo and the identifier, we can see that these tapes were taken from the CD versions, so we know that this is a CD to cassette dub. Both tapes have the generic all rights reserved do not copy text, which is ironic of course. I guess the last thing to point out with these tapes is the Dolby logo, and God knows if these were actually recorded with Dolby or not. The tapes themselves are very generic. Laser at least gave us A and B stickers, while Vidax did not. Both tapes sound great for pirates. Have a short listen. I also bought 2 Eurobeat albums from Studio J&J. Because of Poland's interest in Italo Disco, and the natural evolution from Italo Disco to Eurobeat, it means that these sorts of albums weren't too uncommon. The Megamix sounds pretty bad, but the disco one sounds fine. I also have E-Type made in Sweden here, from Mad Vox, not to get confused with Red Vox. This album actually came out in 1994, and seeing how this tape is obviously a pirate, this means this tape must have either came just as the law was being taken into effect, or it was actually illegally produced. Either way, it sounds hilariously bad. I also have some pirates from after 1994. Here's Yakida Pride, released by Canopy. I'm not sure what country this is from as I can't find anything about this label. The fact that they managed to copy the font of the Yakida logo is impressive, and the crop at first seems legit. However, the sound is only fine. I also have a Jessica J tape here from Vigma. This is a Belarus release from 1996. Inside is a lottery ticket, where if you send off this ticket to Ligma, you may win something. Tapes, I would imagine. While the cover art looks bootleg AF, the other side actually looks really nice with this light sans serif font. The tape claims it's from a digital master and that it's Dolby HX Pro encoded. I imagine the former just means it was taken from a CD, but you know what? This is one of the best releases that I have in terms of sound, bootleg or official. In Poland, cassettes lasted up until about 2004, because despite the fact cassettes cost a similar price to CDs, they were still a cheap alternative, and not everyone at the time had a CD player. My newest cassette is from 2003, and it is an album from an Italian singer Ingrid, who sings in French. What is worth pointing out here is the Dolby HX Pro encoding. Yes, even in the 21st century, HX Pro was still being used. Don't let Wikipedia fool you. I also own Escajito Volume 2 from 2002, which has some of the best songs from 2002. I'm not sure how much longer the cassette format lasted in Eastern Europe, but I know that in Ukraine it lasted up until at least 2006. Here's a bar graph to show you how differently things were over in America. In 1994, we can see the amount of tapes sold go down massively, and this continues year by year until 2003, where cassette is no longer on the graph. This graph is ultimately pointless since there isn't a Polish counterpart, but shows that by the time these tapes were made, you likely couldn't find any new cassettes in stores in America. Having wanted to create my own tapes with music from the 80s and 90s, I bought myself a 5-pack of tapes from Amazon. I was expecting some Chinese no-name brands, and yet I received TDK cassettes. I presume they're fakes, but if they are, they're really high quality. Anyway, here are the tapes I created. The first is chill music from the 90s up until the very early 2000s. The design of the tapes is simulating a very early Radio Z design, before they changed their logo and cover style. The second most impressive tape of mine is this. Galaxy is a modern day band that exists as a parody of the Polish disco polo genre. With this cover, I went ahead and used design cues from other disco polo cassettes from people such as Accent and Boys. I love how this turned out, it looks as authentic as their music sounds. I also sent a video over of this cassette and the band loved it too, which made me happy.
Kosmosu wysłał ci list, wolałabyś kolegów.
I also created a Home Odyssey design because I love this album a lot, and I also had it dubbed on mini disc. And hey, the album's style fits perfectly with the deaf, muddy sound of the cassette. This style of design is meant to emulate the pirate cassettes that we've seen in the previous segment. I think the design came out quite well, but I think it's still a little too clean. Like, believe it or not, it's actually hard to make a crap design, I actually have to go out of my way to make it look authentically bad. The cassettes aren't going to last forever, with the expected lifespan being 30 years before the audio starts deteriorating. These tapes from the early 90s are truly on their last legs. Despite taking 5 years for me to finally get into collecting cassettes, I'm glad I have actually done so, because in the next few years, these tapes will start sounding worse and worse until eventually there's nothing left. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and seeing that you're here listening to this, it means that you managed to get through the entire video, which I really appreciate. I really enjoyed this format of showing off my collection and my equipment, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it too. If you guys would like to see more videos like this, I have a companion video over on Missing Pixel, showing mine and my dad's 80s Eurobeat and Italo Disco vinyl collection. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.